Hi, I'm Alexandra Lemp, and this is what your sub needs to know. So, this is actually my first year teaching in my own classroom. For the last 2 years, fresh out of college, I was substituting full time, which was frustrating because I was a teacher and I wasn't able to teach because it wasn't my classroom and I wasn't able to establish meaningful relationships with the students because I was usually only there for one day. But I did learn a lot from it. And I learned a lot about classroom management techniques, how to arrange classrooms, and just generally how different teachers run their classrooms. And most importantly, or most directly, I learned what your substitute needs to know. So the basics, start at the beginning, when and where. Make sure that you include in your sub binder, your subfolder, your subtub, whatever you use, you need to have the regular bell schedule and the activity schedule. So for pep rallies, or if you have an advisory period, make sure both of those schedules are in there because you will have absences where you have a sub that you are not planning for, and they need to have both of those schedules. Also, your duty schedule. When and where do you have duty, and what are your responsibilities on that duty? A map of the school. They need to know where the teacher's lounge is, where the office is, the teacher and student bathrooms, the cafeteria, and I actually should have included the library on this list too, because when you let your students leave the room, you need to know where they are going. So you know roughly how long they should be gone. And if there were an emergency, you know how to go get them if you had to. In case of emergency, make sure you include your drill procedures. There may be a practice drill for intruder on campus, fire, or tornado while you are gone. And especially if it was an unplanned absence, you aren't able to tell your substitute when that will be. So they need to know what to do. And in the case of a real emergency, they need to know where to do. So include a extra copy of the class rosters for all of your classes so that they can take roll and make sure they have everyone. And also include a school map with the exit path clearly marked for each of these scenarios. Who are your students? Include class rosters, okay? A lot of schools, sometimes the office would give me a class roster, but it was to take roll and I had to send it back to the office. Other times, I just didn't have a class roster. And your substitute needs to be able to know how many students are in that classroom and their names for the entire class period that they are with those students. And please include a seating chart. It makes all the difference in the world. As a guest, the kids don't know you. You don't know the kids. So there isn't a great deal of respect in that the students don't really believe that the substitute has very much authority over them. They know that they are a guest there, only there for one day, and they know that that substitute doesn't know the norms of their classroom, and the substitute doesn't know their names or anything. So they will try to get away with stuff. And being able to call across the room, John, sit down, Lisa, put your phone away, it makes a huge difference being able to call them by name. I mean, just imagine trying to call across the room, hey, you with the jacket. Or if you need to actually walk over there, then you are interrupting what you are doing, and you may have been passing something out or helping a student with an assignment or answering a question. It's poor classroom management if you don't know the students' names. Just think about how hard that first week of school is before you learn their names. So include a seating chart. When I was substituting and when I was left a seating chart, I would tell the students, I am taking roll by the seating chart. So if you are not in your assigned seat, you are absent today. Because even with the seating chart, the substitute doesn't know the kids' faces, so they don't know if they're in the correct seat or not. They may be calling them by the wrong name all class hour. So telling them that if they're in the wrong seat, their absence usually helps quite a bit. And most students do what they are supposed to, but there's always a couple. Write down reliable students for each class period. I would suggest having at least 2, because the one may be absent on the same day that you were absent. So a couple of students that you can trust to give accurate answers. If the substitute has a question, that student will tell them the truth about whether something is allowed or not, for example. And if the substitute needs help or needs to send something to the office, they can trust that student to go there and come back to the classroom without getting into any kind of trouble or going anywhere they're not supposed to. And also list any special concerns. So you have to be careful here because you can't divulge confidential information to the substitute. That is a violation of FERPA and IDEA and HIPAA. So don't give specific information. Do not, and I've had teachers do this for me, do not leave a copy of the student's IEP for them. That is confidential information. The substitute is not allowed to see that. However, give them enough information that they can protect the students. I was in a classroom one time, I believe it was 5th grade, and there was a student who had some anger management issues. And the teacher did not leave me any note about it. So during class, he was passing out some papers for me, returning work. So he was calling out students' names. And a couple of students started teasing him that he didn't know everyone's name. And I was trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing in the next 10 minutes. So I didn't intervene immediately because most students would have been fine. I didn't feel that the students were being malicious. They were just kind of joking. But this student in particular could not handle it. And he lost his temper. He threw down the papers and he stormed back to the back corner of the room and pulled this box off of this bookshelf. Well, this bookshelf had textbooks on it, and it looked like the teacher's storage area. It did not look like something that the students should be getting into. So I went back there and I was ready to tell him to put that away. And then he explained to me what it was, and it was a box of some different sensory toys and things. It was her calm down spot where he could go and play with the toys and just take a break and calm down, get his emotions back under control. But I didn't know that. So if I had continued to tell him to put that away, and if he hadn't explained it to me, if he had been so worked up that he didn't know to do that, he's only in 5th grade, I could have actually escalated that situation. And this entire situation could have easily been avoided if I had known. I would have intervened immediately when I heard those students giving him a little bit of a hard time about not knowing everyone's name yet. So obviously, like I said, a teacher couldn't leave me specific information detailing the student, all of the student's behavioral issues and accommodations. However, she could have warned me. In this situation, she didn't even need to tell me what specific student had problems managing their anger. All she had to tell me was that if any student gets worked up or overly upset, I have this box over here that they are allowed to get out and play with the toys for a few minutes to calm down. That doesn't divulge anyone's IEP or accommodations, nothing private. It just lets me know that that is there. There is probably at least one student in this classroom that needs it. So I am aware to look out for that. So just give enough information that the substitute can protect the students and hopefully intervene before a situation gets out of control. It's almost Halloween, so who are you gonna call? Got a little Ghostbusters picture there for you. So not every teacher, in my experience, has the list of phone numbers for the building in a obvious placement. So make sure that you have written down the number to the office and the nurse, the counselor and librarian, and a neighboring teacher, and the building RSO. So the office, the substitute has to be able to call the office if something gets out of hand, or even something as simple as, I sent attendance and counted the student absent. They are actually here. Please fix that. I have called the office numerous times as a substitute because, like I said, some students don't believe the substitute has any authority, and to a certain extent, they don't, because they don't know the students and they're only there for a day. So they have to be able to call the office. If you have a button on the wall, tell the substitute specifically where that is. The nurse, they need to be able to call and ask if it's okay to send a student, especially this year with COVID. My school is being a little bit extra strict on allowing students to go to the nurse. And also at my school, I'm in the high school and we share the campus with the junior high, but they're separate buildings. They're just right next to each other. But the nurse moves back and forth between the two, so she's not always in her office. So I need to call and make sure she's there before I send a student. The counselor, if a student is having a hard time or there is a disagreement that breaks out that the substitute isn't able to handle, they need to be able to call the counselor. The librarian, students are going to ask to go get a book, or the substitute may tell them to go get a book if they say they don't have one, but they should be able to call the library and ask if it's okay for them to come down to the library at that time. Because if the librarian has a class, she may not allow them to. The RSO, if a fight breaks out, they have to be able to contact the RSO. And also have down the classroom phone number and also the location and name of a neighboring teacher that can help them out if they have any questions. If they can't find something, if they need to step out and use the restroom and they need them to keep an eye on their class, tell them a teacher that they can go to for help. Every school is different, so don't assume a substitute knows how things work, okay? Because it was kind of surprising to me substituting that how different building policies were even within the same district. Classroom policies. Just like every school is different, every classroom is different. So what needs to happen in your room? Technology is a huge thing. So what is your cell phone policy when you are gone? This was rarely left for me, so I didn't know if students were allowed to have their cell phones out during class or not. Some teachers are okay with it, some are not. Some buildings ban it, some leave it up to the teachers. There's very little consistency here, so you need to explicitly state it. When I didn't have the teacher's rule, I would tell them, if I allowed them to listen to music on their phones, if it was independent work, I would tell them that once they put their music on, they had to turn their phone upside down so that they weren't being distracted by the notifications, or put it in their pocket so that I knew they weren't messing around on it. If you require students to leave their phones at a charging station or something, tell the substitute that. Headphones. Do you allow them to listen to music? And if they have an assignment on Google Classroom or something where they need to listen to something, what do you do if they don't have their headphones? Do you have some extras that they can borrow? This year, if you do, what is the sanitation process for that? How do you sanitize them in between students? I generally tell them that if I'm speaking, headphones should not be in their ears at all. If it's independent work and I told them they can listen to music, then earbuds, it needs to be only one earbud. And over the ear headphones, they need to skew one so it's not covering their ear so that they can hear me. That is a classroom management issue. They need to be able to hear instructions, and it's also a safety issue. If something is about to fall on their head, they need to be able to hear me to yell at them to move. And Chromebooks. What do they do if their Chromebook is dead and they don't have a charger? Do you have a spare one? Do they need to find one from another student? What do they do if they don't have their Chromebook? I had students just straight up lie to me that they didn't have their Chromebook because they didn't want to do the work. Do you have hard copies printed out for them to do the assignment on paper instead of the laptop? Do you have a different assignment for them to do? Do they need to sit there and read and do it as homework? Do you have a charging station in your room for them? What needs to happen if they say that they don't have their Chromebook or their Chromebook is dead? Some more policies. Leaving the room. When is that acceptable? Under what circumstances? How many students are allowed to leave the room at once? Do they need to take a pass with them of some kind? Same thing for the bathroom policy. When are they allowed to use the bathroom? How many at a time? Do they need to sign out on a clipboard or something? Do they have to ask, or are they free to go as needed? Out of their seat. Are they allowed to be out of their seat in class? And for what reason and when? Do they need to wait until after you are done giving instructions? Do they need to raise their hand and ask before they get up? What's the policy? And talking. Are they allowed to talk when a substitute is there? During what kind of assignments are they allowed to talk? What do you do if they are getting too loud? Every teacher has different policies for this, so make sure you say that. Class instructions. What are the students supposed to be doing? So in between classes, this is actually for the substitute. Do they need to be standing in the hallway monitoring the hall? Do they need to be standing somewhere else monitoring things? What should the substitute be doing between classes? How do you take attendance? Some schools, they send it to the office with the student. Others, the substitutes are supposed to leave it on the teacher's desk for them, and the teacher will enter it when they return. What is the actual assignment? A lot of assignments are on Google Classroom or Schoology. Do not trust that your students are going to read the assignment and know what to do. Have it written out for the substitute, because the substitute needs to know what they're supposed to be working on. What should their computer screen look like so that they can monitor if they are off task, if they are doing something that they shouldn't be? What should the sub do with student questions? Are you going to be reachable? Can the students text you or email you somehow? Do they need to ask another student? Free time. If a student says they are done with all of their work, what should they be doing? Should they be reading a book? Should they be doing homework? Do you have extra assignments they should be working on? Do not trust your students to just do it. High school, you can usually be a little bit more lenient on this depending on your students, which you know your students. If they have free time, usually, even if they're off task, they're still quiet because they're just listening to their music or playing on their phone or a game on the Chromebook. Whatever it may be, they're not usually causing problems. And a lot of them will take the time to do homework for another class or something. Younger grades, they cannot handle free time, especially like fourth grade and under. Always provide your substitute with extra work if needed. And where are the supplies? If they are going to need scissors or glue or anything, where is it? Your substitute doesn't know where you keep anything, and they don't know what cabinets the students are allowed to get into. Your students watch you, they know where you keep things, and they may think that they are being helpful and just getting it themselves because they know that the substitute doesn't know where it is. But that may mean that they are getting into something that you don't want them to get into. So make sure you tell your substitute where things are and what the students have access to. Where is the first aid kit? There will always be at least one student that asks for a Band-Aid. And especially if you don't want your sub going through your desk, you need to have the first aid kit in a obvious, visible place. I would just leave it with the subfolder, or you need to tell them where it is. Or if you don't have Band-Aids in your room, you need to tell the sub to send them to the nurse. Computer login. Some school districts have a guest login for substitute teachers to use. Some individual teachers have one. You can even ask your IT guy if they can create one for you. I strongly discourage you from leaving your personal login information to your computer. For me, I save all my passwords and my email is always logged in. So if you log into my computer, you have access to my email and eSchool. Even my email, students, teachers, parents, they are sending me messages about grades and accommodations and things. That is confidential information. And eSchool has all kinds of confidential information. So substitutes cannot have access to that. That violates federal law and state law. So do not leave your personal login information. If you do have a guest account, it can be really helpful to leave that. In elementary, I would look up timers on YouTube because they have no concept of how long 2 minutes is. As an adult, I even have problems with that without having a clock to look at. So I would put up a timer and it would have some music and it would have the countdown on screen, and I would tell them that they have to be in their seat when the timer gets off, or everything has to be cleaned up. And this was in elementary, and it became a game for them, a competition, and they loved it and it worked great. If you have any videos that you are going to be showing on the projector, your sub is going to have to be able to log in to get that started, unless you are going to ask your neighbor teacher to do it for you each class hour. Instructions for any other relevant technology. If you have a smartboard or any kind of projector, a document camera, how do they turn it on? How do they get it to the screen they need to be on? And how do they turn it on and off? Planning time. During your planning hour, what should they be doing? Do they need to go check in with the office and see if another teacher needs help with something? Is that their free time? Do they need to be on duty somewhere? What should they do? Assemblies, do they need to follow the students to the assembly and help monitor, or can they send the students there on their own? Do they need to walk them there, but they don't have to stay? They just have to drop them off and pick them up? What happens if there's an assembly while you are out? And when students are checked out, how does that work? Do they need to take anything with them? Do they need to leave you a note for saying what time they were checked out? What do you want to know? Leave a place for comments for your substitute. Any specific feedback you want, I would specifically ask for what work was done, what was completed, and what was not done. What did you not get to? Also, what students were really helpful, were on task, they did everything they were supposed to. What students needed multiple reminders? Substituting is hard. You have no preparation going in. You may not even know what school you're in until that morning. And like I said, students don't know you. They don't believe you have very much authority. It is stressful. So please impress on your students the importance of being kind and respectful and helpful to the substitute. I had to have a substitute a couple weeks ago, and I told my students that if any names got left, they were going to be scraping the gum off the bottom of my tables. And I didn't have a single name left for me, which was wonderful. Honestly, I didn't expect to, because they all had things they were going to be working on, and I'm in high school, so like I said, when they're done, usually they will play on their phone or do work for another class. They're not disruptive. But if there is anything specific you want to know, if there's a particular student you want to know how they did, leave a note and ask your substitute to let you know. And that just about sums it up. So I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope you have a great year.